Welcome to the Styxxoplix Show, episode 205, Touched by the Presence, with my special guest, Gary Lachman. I am your host, Styxxoplix. We are here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, 95.7 FM, and we're getting a call from London Calling, from the, not the Clash, but the former Sputnik Valentine. That's what I call it, or was that the nickname you came up with, or that your
Oh
dad,
no, that was something my grandfather
or
called
your
me
grandfather?
when I had, well, strangely enough, just about the same amount of hair I have now, but I was about well, however old. It was John Glenn. He was the
Okay.
early
First
famous
orbit.
astronaut.
Yeah.
But it's my mother's father. He didn't speak much English. He spoke Polish,
Wow.
but just because he knew of the Russians sending up, the satellite Sputnik before, so somehow he associated what they were giving kids John Glenn haircuts then, these what they call the John
Ah,
Glenn crew cut. So I
crew
got one of
cuts.
those, and so he associated the crew cut with space, with Sputnik, and so he called me Sputnik. So there you go. But no, thanks for inviting me on the
Yeah.
show. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here in London, England. It's an unseasonably warm April evening. It's been it's what I call collateral benefit of
Collateral
global
benefit.
global collateral benefit of global warming, because
Right.
it's usually it could even be snowing in April in England. So it's yeah, it's very different. It feels like summer's hit already.
So you've gone back and forth with interviews and lectures, or have you been just doing interviews, or have you been doing lectures?
Uh, I I I do whatever comes to hand
Whatever
mostly.
comes
So
to
I've been
hand
doing
is
a lot of interviews, podcasts. I've given talks. I've given online courses. I've done some live events here in London. I'm gearing up for a long 9-week course
like.
that I'm giving over the summer, June through August, through the Cosmos Institute, and this is
Hmm.
alternative educational platform that comes out of Southern California. And yeah, so I'm going to be doing one on it's a strange blend. It's called Existentialism, Consciousness, and the Occult, and it's
Hmm.
about mostly about the work of this British writer that's who's been very powerful influence on myself. A fellow
Hmm.
named Colin Wilson, who died
Colin
about,
Wilson. Now that's
yeah.
renewed my interest in Colin Wilson. Was your book Touched by the Presence? That's interesting.
Well,
You actually got to meet your mentor. That's
well, I mean, I talk about him in it, and the course is going to be around his work, and the title "Touched by the Presence." I mean, that comes from my other life
yeah.
when I was my previous life as a
Gary
musician.
Valentine, right?
Like you said, yeah, you said not the Clash, but yeah, it was pre-Clash. It was Blondie before in the New York days.
You're in the Rock and Roll
Uh,
Hall of Fame, man. How's that feel? That's got to be
how can
something.
I say? I keep waiting for them to send me that letter saying, Mr. Lockman, we've actually made a terrible mistake. We're terrible, terrible, we're horribly sorry. Can you please send us the thing back and all that? But no, that's fantastic. I mean, well, that's one of the things I talk about in the book, and the book is about how I went from being a musician and
Mhm.
playing in Blondie and other bands. I played with Iggy Pop for a while, and then I had my own band for a while as well. And but then I metamorphosed into writing. But the title, Touched by the Presence," comes from this a song I wrote for Blondie called "I'm Always Touched by Your Presence, Dear."
Mm.
And that was a love song for my girlfriend at the time, Lisa Jane Persky. And the story is that during the first Blondie North American tour, we were the support act for Iggy Pop,
Mm.
who had been brought back basically by David Bowie, and David Bowie was the keyboardist, incognito. He wasn't announced, so he was the mystery keyboardist on
Ah,
tour.
okay.
But in any case, during that tour, whenever I went to call Lisa, or she went to call me, we were both doing it at the same time. Oh my God, I just was going to call you. And this is what
Mm.
long before, cell phones or anything like that. You had to be back in the strange days when you had to be someplace at a certain time in
The
order to
right
make a
place, the right
telephone
time,
call.
synchronicity.
Well, you had to be at the hotel. I had to be at the hotel room, or wherever, or some place like that, comparable place. And she was wherever she was. It wasn't like you could be anywhere with your cell phone or your mobile phone. This is
Yeah, you
and
point your
this is long before internet, anything like that. So it was back in those strange days when time, our relation to time, is rather different than it is today.
That's like when you moved to London. That was late '90s, right? Or
Yeah, 96. Yeah,
'96?
I just knock on wood, I'm celebrating my 30th year here
Ah,
now.
okay.
So just 30 years ago, I just actually it was around this time that I decided to stay. My I forget how long the visa was, 90 days or something like that. I came sort of not quite the middle of January, just short of that, because I got held up in New York. I went to New York for a few days to I don't mean literally held up, but I mean
Yeah.
I had to
Ah,
stay. Had to stay in New York. Because of the blizzard of '96. I was snowed in at my hotel, so I was
hmm.
there for a few days, and then the flight I had to come here was canceled because of this blizzard. So I was there for another, I forget, it was another 3 or 4 days or something. So I wound up coming here like maybe January 10th, and then whatever, my visa was over, So I had to decide either to go back or let my ticket go. So I let the ticket go. So I wound up staying. So it's the usual story. I met somebody, and life takes over.
Did you discover Aleister Crowley's work before you discovered Colin Wilson, or was it through a neighbor?
Around
Around
the
the same.
same time. This I tell that story. This is when I was well, this is, let's see, 19 this time of year, 1975. I'd started playing with Blondie, and first, I mean, it's a long story, but first off, for a while I was crashing. Debbie had a small one-bedroom flat in a part of New York called Little Italy, which was nothing then. It was a backwater. And
Hmm.
she and Chris Stein, the guitarist, they were together then. They were living there, and I got kicked out of the place I was living, and I was kicked out of my parents' house, and I didn't have. I was more or less homeless for a while and couch surfing before it was called that. And
Wow.
any case, I wound up living with them, and then that was too small, so we wound up getting this
Loft.
large a loft, like a floor of this building on the Bowery, and the Bowery was this back then. It was this no man's land, Skid Row,
Hmm.
dead end street,
Okay.
bums and homeless and all that. I mean, now it's transformed. You can't. It's the
A Skid
forget
Row
about
of
the rent.
sorts. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, but then it was, you could live there cheaply, and
Hmm.
so we were on the edge, blank generation on the
Have you
edge
been
and
to
all that
Chelsea?
kind of thing.
Chelsea Hotel, or
Well,
just
I hung out there, and I never stayed there, but I hung out there a couple of times. I mean, there used to be a club across 23rd Street called Mothers.
hmm.
It was a gay kind of disco, but it was like a few other kind of gay kind of discos that started having rock bands play. So Blondie
Just like
played there.
CBGB's. You played there early.
Oh yeah, yeah, but
Or
that wasn't that. I mean, there was,
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
we were, yeah, we I was playing there. Well, again,
Ah, prime
around
example.
this time of year,
Yeah.
1975. So
Okay.
what is that? 51 years ago.
51 years.
Um,
My
yeah,
age. Yeah.
I was 19 and had just been playing with them a little bit, and I had been living in New York already for a year or so, uh, writing a lot of really bad poetry and starving.
Hmm.
And I knew the drummer, Clem Burke, who passed away again a year
Ah,
ago.
okay.
This date, around this date, he passed away, and I knew him from high school. We went to high school together, and I used to see him play in high school bands. So when he started playing with them, I started hanging out at their gigs, and then their bass player left. A guy named Fred Smith, who again passed away recently as
Hmm.
well, and then he went to join Tom Verlaine's band, Television,
Ah,
because Richard Hell, who's the bass player, but he's the guy who really invented punk rock, because he was the first one to do the rip T-shirt routine,
hmm.
and he he's started a band with some of the members from the New York Dolls, who were like the
Ah.
previous generation kind of glitter rock band in New
I remember
York. So
seeing
that
that
was like,
documentary on the New York Dolls. That was, yeah.
oh,
That's,
they were a great band. I mean, when they were on, they were a really great band. I mean, they just played high energy rock, and it was real simple and three chords. It was the kind of thing you felt like, oh, I could play that, in the sense that not that it was that bad or simple, it was that, my God, that's rock and roll. Because again, you have to remember the Dolls are in 73. around there, and it was like all the prog rock stuff was really big. Yes, and King Crimson, and all these sorts of bands that were
Maha
fantastic
Vishnu
virtual.
Orchestra.
Oh yeah, John McLaughlin. I listened to all that stuff. I mean, I knew people, but the thing is, I knew people when I was growing up in Jersey, New Jersey. I knew
Mm,
people who could play that stuff. They'd put the headphones on, they'd sit there, and they'd work this thing out.
wow.
There's no way this side of heaven I'm ever going to be able to play, but I could play. I can play the New York Dolls stuff and the stuff but that was the exciting thing about it, because then okay, then you start playing it, and if I knew people who were great musicians, I hung out with them. I used to go to their gigs, and Clem Burke, drummer, he was one of those. But if you only know a few chords, and you're not trying to play this, perfect kind of stuff. The fact you start putting a couple of chords together yourself, and it starts to sound like a song, it's like, whoa, it's a
Yeah.
very different approach. So I just thought it was more to me, it was like, okay, what can I get out of this? And then I just started a little, another chord. And then, Clem asked me, do you want to audition? Because we lost our bass player. So I wound up playing bass in Blondie. And
Mm.
yeah.
Oh,
So
oh,
that was
huh.
that was March. That was March 1975. Yeah.
Interesting. So, how about this uh, the the breakthrough with Colin Wilson and Aleister Crowley? Was it
Yeah, all right, because
was it-
this is all
yeah,
build up
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
moving
Was that,
into this loft space, because
okay, gotcha.
the guy who had the lease on the building, was this wild, flamboyant gay biker artist who was into the Hells Angels, but he was also into Aleister
Oh,
Crowley.
okay.
And
Wow.
he had the Thoth Tarot deck, which was still a bit rare then, and he would do these impromptu tarot readings, and he did some canvas, paintings based on some of the Trump, not excuse me, not Trump, but the tarot Trumps,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
uh, and other wild things. And then he used to read from Crowley had this a Diary of a Drug Fiend, which is actually
Yeah.
it's not a very good novel, but it's a fun
It's like
read
Fear and
about
Loathing in Las Vegas before Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, kind of. It's has
oh,
got that
it's yeah,
itinerary or whatever, you know.
it's Crowley's romanticized advertisement
Right.
for this abbey he had
Yeah, that's right.
in Sicily, the Abbey of Thelema. And it's a fun read. And he's 19. Wow, I had no interest in any of this stuff, and suddenly it
Mm,
was all fascinating to me. But then I came across another book by this British writer, Colin Wilson, just called The Occult.
mm.
And it was this fantastic page-turning history of magic going back to the Stone Age to contemporary times, and lining it up with philosophy and and science and literature, and just it just was so fascinating, both in the like the people he's talking about, like Crowley and Madame Blavatsky and Gurdjieff
Rudolf Steiner.
Yeats, Rudolf Steiner, and
Yeah.
the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and Rasputin,
So that was like where the breakthrough point that you discovered
well,
all
that's I mean
like
I've always been a reader. I mean, that's one of the things in the book. I start reading when I'm probably earlier than five, but certainly by five I
wow.
was
Okay.
reading, and comic books. And so
So you really reading
I
classics at that age or
no,
two?
no, no, no. I mean, I was five. I was reading comic books. I mean,
Okay,
I'm
comic
saying.
book. Oh
So I
yeah.
was reading. I was reading. So I'm saying a lot of the book, Touched by Your Presence, is about. Well, it's about influences on me that led to my becoming a writer later on, after being in music, and what led up to that. I mean, I just wrote it to myself. So one day
Oh,
I said, people ask me, how did you go from playing in Blondie and doing all this
yeah.
stuff, and then to doing what you do now? And I thought, look, well, I had nothing to do actually, and I need to
Ah,
keep occupied. So I
yeah.
said, okay, how did I? So I just started writing. So I just told myself this story, and it starts going back when I was a kid reading comic books. So I was always reading. So when I read this book.
So you read all the
Um,
'70s cosmic comic books, like Jim Starlin and during
No,
that
I mean,
period.
I know. I mean, I no, I was reading comics in the early 90s. I was born in 1955,
Oh,
so
wait,
I'm 70. I turned 70
oh,
at the end of last year. So so I was reading. It's what they called the Silver Age. So it was like
hmm.
the Superman, Batman, but Flash, Green Lantern, and the Justice League, and these early 1960s versions of those kind of things, and then the early Marvel stuff, with Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and Spider-Man and
Yeah,
X-Men. I mean, I write about this in the book, and I also write about it in my first book called Turn Off Your Mind, which is
ah
about the influence of sort of occult ideas on popular culture in the 1960s, and
mm,
how, like, it influenced the Beatles because they have Crowley on the cover of
right.
Sergeant Pepper's and C.G. Jung and Aldous Huxley and things like that.
And just that
So
album
any
cover.
case, when I came across this book by Wilson, The Occult, it just was such a good read, but it was also packed full of ideas
Mm,
that it just hit me, and I just started looking for other stuff like that, and it was a good time because um, early 70s, mid 70s, there was this occult boom in publishing and stuff. So there's lots and lots of stuff that was out there on in these cheap editions. So I just got into it, and
they have
wasn't until later, until like '78, when I moved to LA, that I started doing more hands-on, practical, kind of stuff and all that for a while.
how about that you said he had a stint with the OTO. How did that go? That's interesting.
Well, yeah, I'm sort of referring to that. I mean, it was interesting. I mean,
Mm,
I tell the story in the book that there used to be this great bookshop on Hollywood Boulevard in LA called Gilbert's, and it had rare editions, but it had a very, very good, well-stocked occult section, and people like Jimmy Page and Bowie
oh,
and
okay.
uh, Keith Richard and Kenneth Anger, the filmmaker. They were like his, some of his clientele. So when I lived in LA, the first time around, sort of late '77 into 1980 or early '81, I moved back to New York. Um, um, I remember going in this bookshop and hunting these things down because I love going to bookshops. And um, again, it was before the internet, so they had an old-fashioned bulletin board, with a file card. Somebody put a notice up, and it was for this Crowley group. So I
Hmm,
said, okay, well, what the hell? I'll check them out. So I took the number down and sent them a postcard or something. And then a day or two later, there's a knock on the door, the house where I was living. And I open, it's this guy, and he asks me if I'm ready to commit myself to pursuing the knowledge and conversation of my holy guardian angel.
wow.
And I had to think about it,
Hmm,
for a second. It's sort of like, do you want to join the Jehovah's Witnesses?
hmm,
Um, and I said, sure, why not? And then I wound up joining both the OTO at the time, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and the AA, the Argentum Astrum, the Silver Star. And it was interesting, but I say in the book, it was more kind of a Crowley fan club. I think in retrospect, one of the more interesting things about it is the fellow who I believe initiated me was a guy named Grady McMurtry, who actually knew Crowley in his last days,
huh.
in the late 1940s, because he was in the U.S. military. He was over these parts, after the war, and he had become interested in Crowley. I believe through this. Do you know the whole Jack Parsons story?
Yeah, Sex and
The,
Rockets.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah, yeah, right, right. So
yeah,
he had
Strange
this,
Angel.
he had this hit, yeah, Strange Angel, right? So there was the Jack Parsons, rocket scientist by day and Crowley, magician by night, and so he had in Pasadena, there was that action going on, and I think
Hmm,
McMurtry was part of that, and their contributions were keeping Crowley alive in his last days when he was living in this boarding house in a place called Netherwood.
ah,
Well, the boarding house was Netherwood in a place called Hastings here on the English Channel coast. But in any case, I think this would have been 1978, and I think the fellow who initiated me was this guy.
hmm,
But it was. I mean, I don't mean to generalize, but it's too easy for do with that will to turn into do what you like, and that
hmm.
that 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 that
Which
seemed to be the slippery slope
always
that
misunderstood
um
as far as that is concerned.
yeah, I mean, so I got kind of, and after a while, Crowley himself, it becomes claustrophobic. I mean, he's fascinating in many ways. He's more of a interesting kind of what do you subject.
Yeah,
I mean, I think in the end, I mean, I
myth
wrote a bi
more
I
than myth.
wrote a bio I wrote a biography of him, which is quite critical. But I appreciate that. I think he was a man of genius at times, but it's this kind of thing like if only he had used his powers for good instead of evil. But he wasn't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
evil, but he was completely self-obsessed and completely oblivious to other people, sociopathic, and all of that kind of always leaving somebody else, picking up the check. and cleaning up the mess and all of that kind of thing. So it's almost like exit stage left, as he leaves another, situation.
You okay.
But I mean, and I know people who are seriously involved in his philosophy and his work,
Hmm.
and they're very good. They're very good people. They're very
Like
intelligent people.
the
So,
writer Richard
but just this the context I had. After a while, it got a little
Hmm.
tired for me. So I gave it up after a while.
Tiresome subject. There's interesting that you said Kenneth Anger. Did you ever get into Kenneth Grant and Israel Gardy? Did you correspond with Israel Gardy? Or
No, I didn't. I
uh,
didn't. I read his books. I did have. I had. Well, I wouldn't say it was correspondence, but I did get a brief letter from Kenneth Grant once.
hmm,
I mean again, referring to my first book, Turn Off Your Mind, the Mystic 60s and the Dark Side of the Age of Aquarius, and I talk about his book, The Magical Revival.
hmm,
It came out in the early 70s as being well, it's one of this genre that's wedding together Crowley and H.P. Lovecraft,
yeah.
because
Those are some rare books too. They're pretty lofty prices for those books. Those Kenneth
oh, I
Grant.
mean nowadays, I'm saying, but again,
It
back when I
was
was
available.
first into this, it wasn't they weren't as expensive back then. I mean,
Oh,
they were just regular books. Now they're no, I mean that whole oh, I forget what it is. That whole series he did.
yeah.
This kind of
Typhonian trilogy.
the Night Side of Eden
Yeah.
and things of that sort. And yeah, well, he took it in a dark kind of path and
Mm,
the Kleepoth, the negative tree of life, the dark, and
mm,
it just got. But again, when I was first reading it in 1977, wow,
mm.
then later on say, yeah, yeah. But no, I had mentioned his book in
Romantic.
my book, and I said something like, his reflections or whatever speculations on links between Crowley and Lovecraft. I'm paraphrasing myself, but led to something like, many a marijuana fueled evening of discussion or
I
something like
remember
that.
you saying
And
that.
then, and then he wrote me back and saying, I don't remember any so-called evenings with marijuana and discussing my work or something like. But I knew people who knew him, and there's a wonderful bookshop here called the Atlantis Bookshop that goes back to the 1920s,
Hmm.
a century ago, a little bit more than that, starting up. And Crowley was involved in that, and Grant was involved in that. And I tell quite a few stories about him in that book. But Israel Regardie, I mean, I write about him in my biography of Crowley. No, I didn't correspond, but I did read his books, and his Tree of Life was one of the
Ah,
early books for me that really got me interested in trying to understand magic and ceremonial magic in a kind of
and through
serious way.
Colin Wilson, you almost met Robert Anton Wilson.
Oh yeah, that's
But you had
one
a
of the
hangover or something, or I think.
yeah, one of the great regrets. Yes, yes, when this would have been sometime in the early 90s. I can't remember exactly when, but I got to know Colin Wilson in 1983. I made a pilgrimage here. I was
Mm,
living in LA then, but with a friend we came over to Europe for a 2 month extravaganza tour, and I made a pilgrimage to where he lived in the
Cornwall,
very
right?
far, yeah, Cornwall, the very far west country. His widow, sadly, Joy Wilson, she just passed away recently.
Mm.
She was a wonderful dear soul, and I met her first before I met him because she picked me up at
Oh
the
yeah, she
train
was
station to
okay.
take me. She
Yeah.
was very no, she just passed away. She's 94, so good for her.
Wow.
But yeah, so I made this pilgrimage, and then I kept in touch over the years, and we corresponded. And then he came to LA. He was giving a series of book signings and talks in California. And I met him, and he was staying at like the equivalent of a travel lodge or something. I mean, it was just like it wasn't horrible, but it was like some,
Econo Lodge or something like
yeah,
that.
whatever, something. And I was working at this bookshop called the Bodhi Tree, which is just it was a fantastic,
Oh, that's your New Age
uh,
bookshop that you work.
yeah, very well known New Age bookshop that the actress Shirley MacLaine had sort of made very, very popular through her
Out on a limb.
out on the mini series and all that.
Yeah.
And I was house sitting for one of the owners, and he had this fantastic three story what I call a Zen castle in
Mm.
the Hollywood Hills in Laurel Canyon. So it's three
Laurel
stories.
Canyon. Okay. Yeah.
It's had terrace garden, a jacuzzi. I mean, what's not to
Ah,
like? And so
luxury.
I said, would you like to come and stay here at this place rather than there? And they said, sure. So they checked out of where they were. I think even immediately. So and then we went, and so we had these evenings or these parties a few times, and I got rather carried away one. And I remember the next day, Colin invited me. He was going to have like sushi lunches with Robert Anton Wilson, and I just was so hungover the idea of having sushi, but I kicked myself for not.
Ah,
I should have made a Gurdjieffian super effort and gone, but like I mean Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger and
yeah.
Schrodinger's Cat and all those, and then the Illuminatus
Illuminatus trilogy.
really. I mean, that was stuff I was eating all that stuff up. I mean, I met Timothy Leary around, the same time. I actually met
Okay.
him twice. I met him once in LA, then I met him another time in New York when I had my band.
Oh, his
Uh,
estate
the
or
no, oh
uh,
no. He was making a comeback. This is when he
oh.
got out of jail, or so this would have been 78 or 79.
Hmm.
And a mutual friend somehow said, "Oh, this guy Gary, he used to be in Blondie. He's got his own band now. They're the No, KNOW, and he's into consciousness and all this kind of stuff. Maybe the two of you could do a gig together. He could play his band, and you could talk or something." So we met up at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, and nothing came of it. But it was like just hanging out with him across the table and all of that. And he was there was no, he wasn't spaced out or anything. He was
Okay.
fine and all that. But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, this I dropped some names in the book. I mean,
Right.
Ginsberg, I met William Burroughs, and some other
Oh,
people
how
and
was that
people like
encounter
that.
with Burroughs?
Which one?
Mr.
Well,
Burroughs.
it was sort of like
Huh.
oblique. I mean, this was I met him. Um, I got back playing with Blondie again.
Okay.
I mean, I'm realizing now I don't tell this story in this book. I tell this story in an earlier memoir called New York Rocker, which is so. That came out 2002, so it's like 24 years ago now. My God, I forgot. I've been doing this a long time now.
Yeah.
That's solely about my time in Blondie. And at the end of that book, I told the story of how when I first moved here in '96,
Hmm.
I was talking to you about this in the beginning
Yeah.
earlier. Early into that, or I got a phone call from Chris Stein, and he was putting the band back together, and he wanted me to come to New York. So after establishing myself in London, I wound up going to New York for a while and playing with Blondie. And this would have been late '96 into '97. And
Oh, okay.
and at one of the things we did is there was what's called the Nova Convention, which was in Lawrence, Kansas, and
Okay.
that's where Burroughs was living.
Yeah.
And there was a big thing. It was Laurie Anderson, Patti Smith, Philip Glass, well,
Philip Glass.
Debbie Harry, Christine, and not I wasn't a name, but I was playing it. John Giorno. I'm trying to think. There was some other people. So it was this kind of event celebration, and I tell the story where um, there was a press conference, and all the named people were kind of up there, but there was like an empty seat next to Burroughs.
Oh, it was a panel.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, it was a panel, and I was like, just I wasn't there. I was in the audience back, and then Chris Stein said, "Come on, no, come on, sit down." And I said, "Me? No, 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 sit down."
Huh.
So I sat down, but I just wound up sitting next to Burroughs, like that. I was looking at him, and then Patti Smith was late, and
Hmm.
she comes in late, and she looks around, and there's no seats, but she grabs one, and she shoves it in between Burroughs and me,
Oh,
and she's
wow.
like, sort of like, "Move over, nobody," and she's kind of like. So I mean, it was just kind of oblique. But the other thing I remember of that was that at one of the dues afterwards, she kept topping up his vodka. I
Hmm.
think Coke and vodka he was drinking, something like that. So any case, so it was but not a direct one-on-one, but an oblique being in the room with kind of thing. But there's some other characters in there.
Hmm. Interesting that So it all leads up to like the touch by the presence leads up all to your
Well, the thing is, this, yeah, we kept, like Lisa and I kept having these experiences, and so I wrote this song, and
yeah,
then it became a big hit. I'm always touched by your presence. It was a big hit in 1978. It's a long time ago, not in
yeah.
the States, but in the UK and in Europe. And then so that's the
Are you actually
first
living
my
off the
my
royalties?
first I was going to say my first foray into writing about any of
Ah,
these sorts of things wasn't a book, it was a song. And
okay.
and so then, but around the same time, that's when I started recording these precognitive dreams I was having.
Hmm.
And that I wrote about those many years later in a book called Dreaming Ahead of Time, which I wrote during the first lockdown here, the first COVID lockdown
Hmm.
in
Okay.
2020.
Dreaming ahead of time. Is that also with the synchronicities too?
Well, yeah, it's precognition,
Okay.
synchronicities, and coincidences, and they're all kind of tied. They're all tied together. They're all kind of. I mean, I don't have a theory so much as it's more like, okay, I'm as accurate an observation and an account as I can, and looking at other people's ideas of what they thought and what could possibly be involved in it. But I don't know. I mean, it's more like I'm not convinced by any of the sort of quantum
Hmm.
Deus ex machina. That's kind of the new Deus ex machina. So, let's bring in some quantum physics, and oh yes, that'll explain everything. But
Hmm.
I don't doubt that there are elementary particles that go backwards in time and all that, but none of that seems to
I guess
have.
I'll have to go to CERN. Go to
I'm sorry. Hmm?
Gotta go to Switzerland for CERN for all that information,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's
And
kind
have
of
them
like, I
apply
mean,
that.
but when I'm experiencing these things, it's got nothing to do with positrons. And it's about my, and how could a positron know anything about my life?
Yeah.
How would the positron know what I'm going to do in the future or anything like that?
How do you
So
feel
it's a
about
very,
that though? As far as like not to change the subject, but as far as AI is concerned, and with the pros and cons of it, what do you?
AI.
Yeah.
Well,
Have you delved into that matter?
I grew up on those 1970s science fiction
Uh,
movies where the
yeah.
computers take over. So I'm
Or like Dune, like you
uh,
said, with
I,
the machines.
I
Yeah.
if you're listening to me, I want you to fail. Did you hear me? I want you to fail. So that's why I said that. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I mentioned, do you know the Colossus, the Forbin project? That
Hmm.
was a big one in the early 70s, and
Oh,
it's back when, a supercomputer was the size of a whole
of a
room,
room. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that kind
I
of
remember
thing. And but it's one of the ones where they make this one that is so perfect, infallible, all of that. And so it, of course, it becomes responsible for all of the defense systems and things of that sort.
that.
And then uh, it starts making decisions for itself.
Hmm.
And then, unbeknownst to the U.S., the Ruskies, the Russians have one as well.
Hmm.
And it starts doing the same thing, and they communicate, and then the two of them start to take over, and so it's suddenly, you know, they're calling the shots, and not to give it away, but it's not a happy ending. It's not as if they're able to defeat it in the end. So I mean, that sounds alarmist, but these days, I think it's impossible to be an alarmist
Hmm.
these days. I mean, what everything is happening in the world. I mean,
Makes me think about
I
the.
mean, don't get the snowball going, because it's one thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, one thing after the other and all that. But the AI thing, I don't know. I mean, of course, it's doing all this other stuff, but the kind of I've not got I've never tried it. I've never tried Chat GPT with any of that kind of stuff. But it reminds me of, I mean,
It's
when I see the
Claude now.
art that
People are using, they're migrating to
I mean,
Claude.
the whole idea that people are like writing, oh, I've written a book, and yeah, yes, AI did. I mean, I no, I actually, now that I do have a personal interest. I'm one of the many authors that are involved in this Anthropic
Hmm.
lawsuit.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, for scraping
Hmm.
works of mine without any acknowledgement. So there's this
Oh,
massive class action lawsuit going on that's
right.
billions and billions of dollars are involved. I don't know exactly what individual authors will get out of it, but so in that, and on the other side, there's something. I'm a member of in the UK of the Society of Authors, and they've
Hmm.
had this sort of initiative. something they call human authored. So they want something that's, actually written by a human being, not created by a machine in some way to be, you know,
So
noted on the cover in some way. This is so
right.
it's very, very strange when you think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, the only way I come across it now is, if I Google something, it's inescapable. The first thing you get is this, the AI kind of breakdown of it and all the summary stuff. But I tell you this weird, I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent, but again,
Yeah, it's
another one of
okay.
these 70s sci-fi films, Logan's Run.
Oh, I remember that. It
Um,
was like age 30.
Michael, yeah, yeah, Michael York and Jenny Agutter. But in it, at one point, no, no, sorry, wrong one, wrong one. Rollerball.
Rollerball. James
Rollerball,
James.
James can't, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Rollerball, 1975. He wants to go read up about the history of what they call the corporate wars, but
Mm.
he can't find any books. All he can find are summaries.
Oh wow. Synopsises and stuff.
Oh, yeah, and which is what you get,
Yeah.
now with the
Uh,
AI all the time. Oh, let me
uh,
summarize that for you.
yeah. Yeah.
No, no, no. I don't want the summary. But it's. Oh, it just struck me because I mean I saw that film ages ago, and then I have a collection of, I have like a collection of old sci-fi fantasy horror from 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s, all that. My sons come over, they say, Dad, this is so 20th century. What are you going to do with all
Yeah.
these things?
Yeah.
But I have them, and I'm glad I have them now because they're hard to get. So, but I hadn't watched it in a while, and I pulled it out and was watching it. I forgot it's a very, very good film. It's actually it's quite a good film. But the whole corporate, world as well, the kind of corporate
Like
government and
reminds me of Tyrell Corporation, the Blade Runner one.
yeah, 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 yeah,
The,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, very
mega
much, very
villain
much.
from Tyrell. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, it's true, but it just struck me that, oh yeah, even then they were um in this dystopia you can't get at the
The
history
Philip K.
because
Dick
it's,
dystopia. Yeah, that's the.
yeah.
I was
But yeah, so that's my take on AI. Yeah, so
okay. So you haven't used Suno or Sando or Sora or anything like that. Okay.
no, I haven't used any of
The
that sort of thing,
prompting
you
of
know.
putting the lyrics into the generating of
No.
music and stuff. That's
No, 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 not at all. I mean, I was gonna say people. I
you've seen it
see
though,
people
right?
on.
Yeah.
No, I've seen stuff
Yeah.
like that. Oh, I asked
Yeah.
Buddy whatever to write me. No, I wanted to get, what was it, Alexa and Sierra, get and have them argue. Can you get them? No, no, yes, I no, no, that's the wrong thing.
Oh yeah, there was they had this one called
Doing that each other like.
Molt Book. Have you heard of that? Where AIs talk to each other or something? It's like a
Oh
platform.
yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
But someone was saying and they can overhear them planning something.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
no, there's fantastic. Again, I believe this might be apocryphal, but this is supposed to be Andy Warhol's favorite film called Creation of the Humanoids,
Hmm.
and it was at 1960s, and it's on YouTube. At
Okay.
least I get it
I
here,
gotta look that
early
up.
1960, and it's one of these cheapo sci-fi, but it's about the future where these robots. Um, there's a whole campaign that robots can't look like humans.
Hmm.
Because if they start to look like humans, we'll start to treat them to look like humans, and all this kind of thing. But it's a weird context. I can't even begin, but it's all, and it's horribly done. But there's some scenes that it's one of those things
Oh,
that's
it's
so
like
bad
a
it
Planet Nine,
transcends.
outer space, Ed Wood kind of.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, 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 yes. So,
Oh, that's
any case, I'm going off on. Oh yeah, remember
that's
that one,
super
that one,
interesting.
that
It
one.
reminds me of a book by Stephen Flowers. It's called Gothic Meditations at Midnight, and it talks
Oh,
about
I don't know them.
horror and science fiction from 1919 to 1975. Yeah, you might want to
Oh
check that
wow.
out. That's an interesting book.
What Stephen Flowers?
Yeah, Stephen Flowers. I don't know if you've
Okay.
heard of him. He did. He's also went by Edred Thompson or Thorson. I think he wrote the book Lords of the Left Hand Path.
So,
You might-
the name sound, it's not, I don't know his work, but the name
I'll send
sounds
a link to
familiar.
you later.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, great. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so I spend, in when I'm not working hard, diligently,
diligent.
pursuing the good, the true, and the beautiful, I watch these old films at night.
Right on. So beyond the robot, that doesn't seem to be that's one that isn't available really.
Yeah,
It's
it
not,
went out of print. That's sad. That's my book about Colin Wilson.
yeah, I want to get that
About
book.
Yeah, well, I'm working on trying to get it back in print.
Reprint.
I had conversation about that with one of my publishers, but I wasn't happy with how they're going to approach it, so that fell through. Then I approached somebody else, and I was thinking of self-publishing, and
Hmm.
then someone I had mentioned it to a while ago, and I hadn't heard back, and I thought, well, they're not interested. Then they got back to me, so I'm waiting to hear back from them. But if nothing, I mean, it's easier to just give it over to another publisher to do it, but I've been looking up in self-publishing, and it's it's not that difficult. But if nothing else, I'll do that. But this course I'm doing
Okay.
over the summer, I'll be part of the reading material will be excerpts from Beyond the Robot, which I'll make
Oh,
available. There's
okay.
only one book that people have to buy, and it's called The Ultimate Colin Wilson, and it's
Hmm.
anthology of there was one that came out in the 80s called The Essential Colin Wilson. I mean, he's written so much. I mean, he's
Right.
written,
Yeah.
depending how what you count as a book, he's certainly written more than 100 books. I mean, there's close
Hmm.
to 200, but this is like the essence and his work. And he literally starts out as an existentialist writing about freedom and meaning and being thrown into the world and all this kind of dread and
Hmm.
uncertainty and anxiety, and then trying to find a path through that with this character that he calls the outsider.
Yeah.
Who's trying to find meaning in this world without value, and then it's about how the answer to this kind of quest for meaning is in consciousness, and then he just by chance he's asked to write a book about the occult, the one I read in
Yeah.
1975 in the late 60s. Because they said there's this big occult boom. It became very, very popular, so publishers were interested in people writing books about it. So he wasn't that particularly interested in it, but he accepted the commission. But doing the research, he became convinced, more or less convinced in the potential of consciousness for paranormal abilities and variety of things that we would call magic, synchronicities and precognition and clairvoyance and things of that sort. Um, so uh, so he
Hmm.
kind of brings together this early existential kind of philosophical search for meaning and purpose with his discoveries in potentials of consciousness that he
Hmm.
uh, came upon through his study of the occult. And so that's kind of the trajectory of the course and all that. So
Okay.
yeah, so I'll be that's covered in this one book that's an anthology of his work, and then I'm taking chunks of my own book and making that available for people. And the thing about the course is though there's no test. It's not a graded course, so it's just basically if you're interested in this sort of thing, it's a deep dive over a 9-week period. So yeah,
So, how many books do you have total that you've written? Is it like
that I've
a dozen,
written.
couple dozen, or
27,
26?
26 have been
Oh,
published.
26.
There's one with one of my publishers here now that they had to put back
Hmm.
on the back burner for a while. So yeah, that's not going to see print till sometime next year. Sad. I mean, but I,
Oh,
I was I, I was expecting maybe at the end of this year, but yeah.
okay. Because that's a touch by the presence. Like that involves like your before you actually started writing books, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That's
mean, I
like
said it
your
starts with me as
starting.
a kid, and
Yeah.
then when I start, for some reason I had some strange idea that I wanted to be a poet when I was adolescence, and I read a lot of poetry and things of that sort. So I was the guy who couldn't play an instrument, but I knew the lyrics,
Oh.
to the song.
So did you get into like
And
Bob Kaufman and Philip Lamantia, like those poets? You know, Philip Lamantia.
no, no, no. Well, I read the beats, but I was reading a lot like
Oh,
Rimbaud and
Rimbaud.
Baudelaire
Yeah.
and
Okay. Or do you read
T.S.
uh,
Eliot and Blake, and I mean
Maldoror? Maldoror?
I'm
Have you read
oh yeah,
Champs de
L'Autrement,
Latremont?
Chanson de Maldoror, yeah, the songs of Maldoror, yeah,
Baudelaire.
yeah.
Baudelaire. He was in the
No,
boat.
no. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't read them. I read them in translation,
Oh yeah.
but I say in the book, I tell the story when I was in. It's probably about eighth grade or something, so
Hmm.
maybe 12 or something like that. And they had book fairs, where you would you tell your parents there's a book fair, they give you some money, and you'd go buy some book at the book fair. So, but I remember there was a book that it had lyrics to rock songs on one page, and then
Hmm.
poems. So it had Sunny Good Street. Do you know this Donovan
Hmm.
song? It was early 60s. It's kind of a beatnik kind
Huh.
of thing. Or Hamburg, a song by Procol Harum. Uh,
Hamburg. Okay.
or say A Day in the Life, the Lennon
Oh
McCartney
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah, 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 yeah.
Sgt. Pepper. I read the news today, oh boy. So they have like that on one page, and on the other page would be like T.S.
Okay.
Eliot or E. Cummings or Ezra Pound or Yeats or something like that. So there would be like rock lyric, famous poem, rock lyric, famous poem. And so I
Wow.
was like, oh wow. So that must have did it for me somehow. So I that was when I started. I remember I would walk around, hum a popular, pop song in my head, but then I'd come up with my own lyrics to them, some stuff like
Hmm.
that. So, but I mean, so that's what I was doing, my teens, and then when I was first living in New York, oh, I can't go through this. It's too complex. I was living in this strange,
Complicated.
squalid. No, I was living in this squalid
Wow.
storefront in the East Village between First Avenue and Avenue A. Back again, 1974, 75. Back when it was what they call Alphabet City. It was like a no man's land then. You didn't go there. So I was on the edge,
I see. Yeah.
and the guy I was living with was like one of the weirdest guys in my hometown, Jersey, like out on the fringe completely. But then he did a 180 and he became a born again Christian.
Oh.
And well, and it was just weird. And
Let's.
he's the guy who booted me out the place I was living. I became homeless when I was first playing
Oh no shit.
with Blondie and all that kind of thing. So
Okay.
yeah, so but I
Oh,
mean,
I got a interesting question for you. My friend asked in jest about if Debbie Harry actually practiced witchcraft or not. It's like a
I
Colin
know. I
Wilson.
mean, no,
Colin Wilson had to
not
help the witches and that kind of myth or whatever.
well. I mean, I never saw her doing. I mean, she had what I said, a kitschy kind of
Kitschy
kooky,
like that.
fun,
Ah.
kitschy, and no, they had like candles, and I mean, Chris
Oh.
was into it too, so they had pentagrams and all. I mean, in the place we lived in this loft. No, it
Hmm.
was weird. I describe it. We had a statue of a nun, and there was like an upside down cross on the forehead, and there was a fireplace, and
Okay.
all this, but it was all like fun, it wasn't like a Hammer film or something. Like we're
Oh yeah,
practicing anything. I
the
mean,
devil hides out or
what
whatever.
they did behind closed doors, I don't know, but there wasn't that much privacy in this place. But
Yeah.
I think she would read the I Ching every now and then, the I Ching
Okay.
points, and what should we take this gig, or
How does she do
um,
tarot too? Tarot
I
deck?
mean, she probably did, but it wasn't anything like, oh,
Like,
come on, Debbie, read the tarot. You know what I mean? It
uh,
wasn't something that was like, I mean, no, I don't say it in this book, but in this earlier one, New York Rocker, when I started getting
hmm,
into this stuff, at one point they thought I was going to, because there was some animosity between us. That's, we wound up leaving the
hmm,
band and all that,
right.
but they thought I was going to send spells against them.
Or like a hex or something like that.
Something, yeah. I mean, so I mean, they thought I was going to, but I wasn't doing anything like that at all. No, it's more intellectual and spiritual in the sense of I was more interested in altering my consciousness rather than like, oh, how do I
Hmm.
send,
Have
bad
you met?
spirits
What about
to
as
hurt
far
people?
as comic book writers and illustrators of these days? Have you come across Alan Moore or Grant Morrison?
I've met Grant Morrison, and I was involved in a project that he was involved in a couple of years ago. I'm trying to remember. I think it was called The Magic Show. I think it was something they were
Hmm.
trying to sell. And I interviewed Alan Moore
Oh,
um,
okay.
last year. I mean, he was virtually in the space. He was in Northumberland, so I think where he lives, he
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
leave
So that,
apparently.
yeah.
So, but he was, on camera, and I was there, and there's a place called the Century Club here in London in the West End, which is the area with all the theaters and cafes and things of that sort.
Hmm.
And yeah, he was an interesting guy. I mean, he had a book that had just come out called The Bumper Book of
Oh
there's
yeah, the
some the
purple and
Serpent and Moon Bumper
big
Book of
coffee
Magic.
size staple book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Purple. Purple and
And
yellow.
it's an interesting thing. It was kind of like he had this ongoing kind of serial story, and then
Mhm.
here's a fun thing to do on those rainy days. It was these kind of things. I don't know if I don't think they were as popular in the States as they were here, but it was the kind of thing like over the summer holidays, the publishers would put these books out that the parents would buy to give their kids, something to do. So color in this, or can
Okay.
you follow the maze, But so it was something like that, but with all this magical kind of.
Oh, that reminds me of the. Did you ever get the Myth and Magic encyclopedias?
Oh yeah,
Those
again,
were,
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I
those
don't
were
know.
from the
I used to
70s,
have.
wasn't it? Yeah.
I used to, yeah, in the 70s. No, I used to have a whole set of them. No, they were quite good. They were quite good.
Yeah.
James Webb, it was a
Yeah.
very good occult historian. Sadly, blew his brains out, but he was a good occult historian. He
Oh
wrote
wow.
Richard Cavendish.
Oh, the
He was
Black
an
Art.
editor. He
Yeah.
wrote the Black Arts. I mean, that was the book that kind of started the pop like the Beatles and the
Pop
Stones
cult.
getting
Okay.
interested. Yeah, that one came out, I think it was 66, and
Oh,
he kind of reintroduced Crowley in that book amongst other sorts of stuff. Yeah.
and there's that other book, The Morning of the Magicians. Did
Oh,
you get
Morning Magician. That was a bit earlier. Yeah, yeah.
a bit
That's the
earlier?
French one. Well,
Yeah.
that was the one that got the whole decade going and
Yeah.
interested in occult stuff and all that. That was yeah. I mean it's that book. A friend of mine said it's a crap book that changes your life. It's a bad book in the sense it's full of holes. It's full of mistakes,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
it's when I first read it. I mean, I remember reading it at the same time I was reading Eric von Däniken and stuff like that. I'm like, wow.
Oh, Chariots of the Gods
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. So it was around the same context. So it was like these
uh,
great paperbacks that had all this stuff, yeah, the pyramids, and I remember the pyramid book. They put the pyramid on your head and
and
all that kind of thing.
how was it writing for 14 times? I mean, how many different magazines do you write for? Like it.
Not as many as I used to, but I still publish in 40 and Times every now and then. I do more online these days.
Oh yeah, you got
But
your
there used to be. I mean, some of the hard. Well, this Quest magazine, but that's
Quest.
that's
Okay.
just that's like in-house for the Theosophical Society. I
So
mean, it's the sort of thing. There's a couple venues I know. Oh, I have an idea. I wonder, would you be interested? And so if they're interested, I'll write it because I know they'll take it and you get a little money for it and all that. So, I mean, the last thing I did for 40 and Times was actually this time last year. I was about to go on this tour of what they call Asclepia in Greece, which was these ancient sites where people would go and go to these dream incubating
dream
kind
incubator.
of
Oh,
rituals where yeah well it was sort of you would go and these priests or people who tended you would do certain things around you, burn incense, do certain kinds of uh, you know,
okay. Huh.
purification rites, and then to
Oh,
induce you to have a kind of dream. And then they're called Asclepia because the Greek god of healing was Asclepius. And he would come in the dream to you, or the dream would somehow give you some idea of how to deal with your problem or your. So there were different ones. Delphi is one of these, and oh
okay.
God, what's the uh, Epidaros is another one,
Have you
and
personally ever experienced sleep paralysis demons?
oh yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
You ever wrote about that in your books?
Well,
Yeah.
I had a bit about it that I was going to put in this book called Dreaming Ahead of Time, but
Hmm.
it somehow didn't fit in. So I
Oh,
still have it. No, I had a very, very strange experience with that once where I know I was both awake and dreaming
hmm.
at two different consciousnesses at the same time. It was
Is
a
that
very
called
strange kind of thing.
hypnagogic, or in between
Well,
wakefulness?
that's hypnagogia is between sleeping and waking.
But this is
So yeah, but that's just one. You're awake and asleep, but
yeah.
the thing is, I had the sleep. I'll try to tell the story quickly. I had the sleep paralysis, and this was when I was
Okay.
married many, many years ago. And I used to get it if I fell asleep on my back. If I fell asleep on my stomach, getting if I fell asleep on my back, I would get it. And I was there, and I had it, and I'm shaking and shaking. I'm trying to. I can't say
Yeah.
anything, and my wife is hovering over me. And I'm trying to say to her, shake me.
Hmm.
Because if all she had to do was that, and I would, go like that. But
You
she thought I
snap
was
out of
saying, save. She thought I was saying, save me.
it.
And she says,
Oh.
oh, I'll save you. Save you. Yes, She's trying to soothe me and say, fuck all this. but while I'm saying that, at the same time, I'm dreaming
Yeah.
that I'm trying to get her to do it, and in the dream, I'm going like this.
Yeah. That,
So it's a visual, equivalent of saying "shake me." I'm doing that.
mm,
So I'm at the same time I'm trying to say because the sleep paralysis is not letting me. No, it's a very very weird state, and I have to say, even though I haven't experienced it in quite some time, but even though I had experienced it a
yeah.
lot over the years, I never was able to master that sense of panic that comes over
Yeah,
me.
that I had that once when I was like it was shadow creatures. I left the candles on and they came during when the candles were on while I was sleeping. And there was
Mm,
these shadow entities trying to pull me away out of my body or something like that.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
strange sensation. It's like astral travel, but it's them
Well,
connect.
I mean, they say it's the beginning of out of body experience or
Yeah.
astral travel, or I can't say I've had anything like
Oh,
that. Although I did have very very vivid lucid dreams. Where you wake up in the dream and you know you're dreaming.
yeah.
And also very 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 fantastic vivid flying dreams, which I miss them. I haven't had those in a while, but I remember those were like fantastic sorts of dreams.
Awesome. So what do you got? You said you got the one book that's scheduled for
There's
next
a
year?
book, yeah. I mean, it's
Or
it's it's well, it's based on a strange experience I had. I said during the first lockdown here in
okay.
2020,
Hmm.
and I'll try to be brief. It's um, one morning during lockdown, where I live. I mean, behind me I have a small garden, and then it opens onto a communal garden. And I went out one morning. Again, it was probably around this time of year. I think the lockdown was, at least here, March into April 2020. Cup of coffee in hand, and I stepped out and I looked up and I thought, what is that?
Hmm.
And I saw this thing in the sky. I didn't know what it was, and it was the sun.
Hmm.
And I didn't know what it was for a nanosecond or whatever.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, my God, what is that? What do you mean? That's the sun.
yeah.
And it was as if I hadn't seen it before, anything like that. And
Oh.
getting back to this beyond the robot notion,
Hmm.
um, I wrote an article about it, and I analyzing what had happened. What I believe has happened is that because of lockdown, my routine is very different. I was in kind of a mild, crisis mode, sort of alert, being very alert. I was wiping everything down. I was, taking all the
Oh,
precautions, taking all the precautions.
OCD.
All of, yeah, all of the local, so the big markets, they had emptied out early
Hmm.
on. Hoard buying hoarders. So I was getting on my bike and I was cycling to different neighborhoods to little what they call corner shops here, little
Hmm.
mini marts kind of things. So
Okay.
it was all a little like, it was more of an inconvenience than any kind of, really bad trouble for me. But it did, kind of, it was a little bit more, energized.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, what is this strange feeling? How could I know what the sun was and all that? And realized I somehow felt that I was on holiday.
Okay.
The fee, even though, so in the long run, I mean, this robot idea that Colin Wilson has is that we have what he calls a evolutionarily adapted labor-saving device.
Wow.
He calls it the robot. So when you learn how to ride a bike, right? When you first try to ride the bike, it's every little thing you have to pay so much attention to, and the slightest mistake you fall over. Then one day you can ride it. When you're learning to
Like
type or
second
play an instrument,
technology.
when you first do it, you have to, where's that key? Oh, I have to
Right.
put, and
Right.
then one day you can
Yeah.
do it. So when you can do it, when we say you've learned it, he says we've passed it over to this labor saving device that does that kind of work. And now you do the meta level. It's like, okay, where do I want to go on the bike?
Hmm.
What do I want to write on my keyboard? What do I want to play on the guitar?
Hmm.
So you're freed up for this higher level. So great. We wouldn't be able to do anything. We always have to learn how to tie our shoes day one. But the problem is the robot starts doing its job too well. It
Hmm.
starts taking over activities we'd rather do ourselves.
Wow.
So one day you don't, why don't I enjoy riding my bike anymore? Why don't I enjoy playing or whatever it might be? Why am I bored sleeping with my wife? You know,
I remember you.
why?
Yeah.
And it's because this valet is doing it for you.
Mm,
He's not a villain. We need him, and it's ourselves that allow it. I mean, I'm personalizing it, talking
mm,
in metaphor. We allow it to happen.
yeah.
But Wilson said, if a crisis or some inconvenience comes in that forces us to kind of push the robot aside and deal with it, we suddenly feel more alive. And it's a paradox, he says, that we feel most free when our freedom is threatened.
Huh.
There's
That makes
the
sense.
German philosopher Johann Fichte, who nobody knows
Oh, I
about, but
don't know. Yeah.
he was a student of Kant, and he said, "To be free is nothing; to become free is everything." So there's the
I'm
paradox.
free. Oh,
When we have the freedom, we often find it a burden. This is we don't know what to do with it. But if someone threatens our freedom, that keeps it from us, we know exactly what it is and we want it and we fight for it. So
interesting.
there's something in us that involuntarily makes us lose our grip on, and I'm just using freedom because it's a value that's very important to us. So, whatever our deepest held, most important values are, we fight for them when they're threatened, but when they're secure, it involuntarily
Did you get
we
into
loosen our grip. Sorry.
who's it? Not Arthur Koestler, but Eric Fromm? Didn't he have a freedom escape
Fear of
from
freedom.
freedom?
Yeah, yeah,
Fear of
yeah.
freedom.
Fear of
Oh,
freedom. Yeah. Well, that's sort of like this, but we want to give the freedom over to
yeah,
somebody else, the Führer, or
yeah.
the
Yeah,
big daddy who will take care of us
yeah.
and all that because it's a burden. That's what I'm saying. It's a burden. It's a burden because we we're not alive to it. If we were alive to our freedom, it wouldn't be a burden. And one of the examples Wilson points to is the existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre during World War II when he was in Paris and he was working for the resistance. And he said, I never felt so free when I was in danger of being arrested by the Gestapo.
Oh,
So
wow.
logically, that would make you feel much less free, don't you think?
Huh.
And so the same on a smaller scale, I thought this was happening to me with this seeing the sun for the first time in the sense that I was seeing it, not my robot. I was there living that moment because I was faced with this inconvenience and of
Mm,
having to deal with the COVID, the restrictions of COVID. And even
yeah.
then, the my actual physical freedom was more restricted than earlier. You literally, you couldn't. I was riding my bike, but if you stood somewhere for a while, people would tell you to move, that kind of thing. So
Mm,
actually, your freedom.
right.
But I felt more free. I felt like I was on holiday. But that was
Yeah.
because
That's
the
interesting. The
constraints,
bicycle trip.
the crisis
Yeah.
was making me do this. So the book is about unpacking that unpacking what does that mean? What? And the title, it was not my title, but the publisher chose it. Like we forget that we exist.
We
So
forget
that's
that
the
we
title of the book. But that's not until to tell you the truth, I've forgotten what I've written in the book by now because
ah,
I delivered it last year.
okay.
I thought I'd be working on it, over the summer, but
That's interesting what you say about the bicycle trip. I had that one time when I was on a head full of acid. I was like doing these daredevil tricks, and I was like, "How am I doing this?" Tricks on the bike and stuff like that. And
Mm,
I was like under the influence, but it was like that. What you was talking about, like you
yeah.
discovered something for the first time, and then you're able to
Mm,
do it
mm.
like in an expert way. That's
Well, well, I think, sometimes we think
yeah.
ourselves out of being able to do something.
Mm.
I mean, it's not the same thing, but when one of my sons, when he was quite young, I remember we used to go to a park here, and he would do these fantastic flips,
Oh wow.
just run and jump in midair and stuff like that. And it's like, how the hell can he do that? And then it was like he was able to do that for a while, but then at a certain time when he got a little older, it was kind of like, ooh, he started
That
to get
wasn't as
hesitant and
natural. Yeah.
started to think about it. So before he never thought about
Hesitant.
it. It was just
Yeah. Okay.
we start to think. What's the thing? Once you start to think more, intelligence leads to hesitation
Mm.
and oh, what might happen? And it's instinct doesn't hesitate. Instinct goes straight
Yeah.
forward. So
Yeah.
there's, but any case,
Okay.
that's
Cool.
yeah.
Gary. Thank you for coming out, man.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
We can do this again maybe when you get your new book out
Okay.
next year or something
Sounds good.
like that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much. And just to say, so my publisher is happy.
Yeah, yeah,
Touched by the Presence is
yeah.
available wherever. It's published by Inner Traditions, and it's
Yeah, that's a
available
good one.
wherever you
Yeah.
buy fine books.
All right. Cool. All
All
right.
right, my
Thanks, Gary.
pleasure. All right.
All
Take
right.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.